Democracy Forum brings you another not-to-be-missed webinar, Understanding Pakistan's Multifaceted Crisis. For Pakistan, recent years have been marked by a series of debilitating and interconnected crises, political turbulence, economic instability, mounting security issues and regional discontent. What role has Pakistan's influential military played in this scenario? Which institutional reforms to the hybrid political system could bring about positive change? How are Pakistan's domestic and foreign policies impacting its economic development? And can civil society organizations be empowered to bring governments to account? To unravel the various factors underpinning Pakistan's multifaceted crisis, please tune into our live January 22nd debate, bringing your questions and comments for the expert panel.
Hello and welcome. I am Humphrey Hawksley. This is the Democracy Forum debate, where our experts drill down on difficult issues, and this one in a week when we move into a new era of American power. Where does Pakistan fit into this climate of geopolitical deal-making and transactionalism? Understanding Pakistan's multifaceted crisis, its economy, its government, its precarious place in the world, from the dreams of independence. How did Pakistan ever come to this, and how can this nation ever bring itself back from the brink of failure? We have a brilliant team to argue, discuss, disagree, and come up, we hope, with answers. Aparna, Pande, Tahir, Kamran, Syed, Mohammad, Ali, Yunas, Samad. But before I go to them, I will ask Lord Charles Bruce, President of the Democracy Forum, to lay out the background and the canvas of our debate. Lord Bruce, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and welcome to a new series of webinars for 2025. Our focus today has returned to the political turbulence in Pakistan, which shows no signs of resolution. At the end of November, in a demonstration of support for the jailed opposition leader Imran Khan, over 10,000 of his supporters marched on the seat of government in Islamabad, directly threatening the military-backed administration of Shehbaz Sharif. Clearly, this is a crisis which has reached boiling point, but which remains mired in complexity and contradiction. So I'm very grateful to the Forum for planning this event and for securing the attendance of such an eminent panel. And I'm delighted that all our panelists have agreed to participate. And my thanks, as always, to Humphrey Hawksley, who will be taking the role of moderator. At the heart of the crisis lies the perennial instability of the political process. For almost 80 years, Pakistan has been ruled by at least 5 different types of hybrid democracy, which the political analyst Mohammad refers to as establishmentarian democracy. These have all been subject to military interference to some degree, including direct military rule, military bureaucratic oligarchy, ruled by military government under a civilian president, and constant military pressure, which has been the fate of at least 2 elected governments. None of the country's 31 elected prime ministers has ever served a full term. And speaking at a Democracy Forum webinar, which we hosted last October on the critical role of the army in politics and public life in Pakistan, Dr. Aisha Siddiqa explained that the military has achieved, I quote, a permanent foothold in politics. Indeed, its presence has evolved not as an instrument of policy for civilian leadership, but where its engagement with society has militarized the political class, which is a huge part of the problem. I quote, "This militarized class has always given preference to national security over development and has consistently surrendered control of any intervention," she concluded. And underlying the continuing evidence of political turbulence, the Pakistan economy is stymied by unsustainable growth and the tendency too easily to succumb to boom and bust cycles. The economist Asad Syed, speaking for the Karachi-based Collective for Social Science Research, explains that this predicament is unlikely to change until Pakistan increases exports and boosts tax collection enough to fund badly needed government investment. I quote, "Unless you resolve this," he says, "you're not going to grow." And although the country's unstable public finances have been reprieved by a $7 billion funding program, which the IMF offered in July last year, incidentally, the 24th such bailout which it has provided Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif has limited room for maneuver, with interest payments already absorbing over 60% of government revenues. He has been forced to implement a draconian budget, effectively increasing taxation by 40%. Pakistan's over-reliance on foreign direct investment, particularly from China, is another source of concern. Since the inception of CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor in 2015, Pakistan has benefited from investment derived from the Chinese government and state-owned enterprises in the region of $65 billion. Consequently, it now owes 72% of its external bilateral debt to China, amounting to $26 billion. The cost of servicing or rolling over this debt is clearly not sustainable. So it isn't clear how China intends to perpetuate this codependency relationship with Pakistan. Data collected in 2023 by Janes, the defense intelligence company, indicates that 40% of the projects rolled out by CPEC have run into trouble. And of these, at least 20% have been cancelled or delayed indefinitely. It's disappointing, too, that for all the trumped-up expectations, CPEC has not delivered sustainable growth for Pakistan. Manufacturing as a share of GDP has stagnated at around 13% since CPEC started. But it is the diplomatic froideur with India which remains Pakistan's greatest unresolved and incipient crisis. It be possible now to take a fresh approach towards resetting the bilateral relationship. I quote, "We have lost 75 years," he lamented. "Now we should think of the next 75 years." I wonder if any of our panelists share his optimism. Well, thank you very much for deciding to watch this webinar today. And if you have any questions or queries that you want to raise or points, please pass them to the panel through the chair.
Thank you, Lord Charles Bruce. A militarized class, over-reliance on investment from China. And why is it so difficult for India and Pakistan to resolve their differences? We hope to bring you answers to all those questions and more. Please comment, please ask questions. I'm going to ask each panelist to speak for 7 to 10 minutes. We will then pick up with questions from the audience and myself. And at the end of it, we will try to make sure that we have a much better understanding of Pakistan's crisis. Our first panelist is Dr. Aparna Pande from the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C., where she is the director of the Initiative on the Future of India and South Asia. Among her many publications are the Routledge Handbook of Contemporary Pakistan and Explaining Pakistan's Foreign Policy, Escaping India. A moot point for this debate: what are Pakistan's policies vis-a-vis its South Asian neighbors, and particularly India? Aparna Pande, tell us what you know.
Thank you so much. Afternoon to everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the Democracy Forum, Lord Bruce, for inviting me to speak here today. Privileged to be on such a distinguished panel. Every country's most important relationships are with its immediate neighbors. Positive relations with neighbors help on economic and security fronts and ensure domestic stability. Unfortunately, Pakistan has rarely had good relations with any of its immediate neighbors to its east or its west. Relations with its eastern neighbor, India, the country out of which Pakistan was carved out in 1947, have always been friction-ridden. Since independence in 1947, Pakistan's identity and foreign policy have been framed around not being India. This feeling of mistrust towards India and insecurity about India's larger size and intentions led Pakistan's leaders, especially its security establishment and strategists, to argue that India never accepted the creation of Pakistan and seeks to undo partition. This has allowed issues like Kashmir, the conflict over the disputed territory of Kashmir, to stay on the back burner, to sort of not to stay on the back burner, and instead focus on India being an existential threat. Pakistan had another option in 1947, and that would have been to allow issues like Kashmir to stay on the back burner, strengthen people-to-people ties, increase bonds with India, and stabilize Pakistan's domestic politics and boost its economy. However, 77 years after partition, Pakistan's military security establishment remains wedded to the idea that India is a permanent enemy. And this has ensured what's referred to as a Kashmir first policy, means investing in Pakistan's conventional and nuclear strength, and also sub-conventional warfare or support for groups that target India. Lord Bruce asked a question, that is it possible for India and Pakistan to improve relations? Well, in 77 years, if we go back to 2015, which was the last time that a Pakistani head of state and an Indian head of state met, there have been 45 meetings between these head of states between 47 and 2015. There have been repeated comprehensive dialogues. There have been numerous attempts, especially in the 1990s and early 2000s, right down till 2004, 2005, to improve relations. And yet those relations have not improved. That these have not improved means that there are deeper reasons, and those reasons will need to be resolved before India and Pakistan can move forward. Right now, however, the main sort of challenge before India and Pakistan is the Indian state's argument is that till Pakistan takes action against terror groups, or what India calls cross-border terrorism, India will not resume dialogue on any front with Pakistan. And yes, many Pakistani civilian leaders have changed their views and would like better relations with India. But as long as the military security establishment pushes for a Kashmir first policy, it is difficult to see how any Pakistani civilian prime minister will be able to initiate and convince India that that they should move forward on a dialogue. All of this ties into Pakistan's multiple crises. If the Pakistan's economic crisis, Pakistan's economic challenges would be eased if Pakistan had better trade relations with India. Actually, Pakistan's economic crisis would also be eased if there was trade across the subcontinent. Pre-47, the South Asian subcontinent was the most integrated region in the world. Today, it is the least integrated region in the world. I'm sure the other panelists can discuss how. But if we just give an example, the Southeast Asian region, ASEAN, countries within the region trade with each other. So about 25% of their trade is with their neighbors. In the European Union, 50% of more trade is with your neighbors. In South Asia, it's less than 5%. And a lot of it has to do with the India-Pakistan dynamics, which prevents regional trade, a regional trade agreement, a regional free trade area. Pakistan's relations with India also impinge on its relations with its neighbor to the west, Afghanistan. And to a large extent, the India factor plays a role there as well. The territory that comprises Pakistan historically was either part of an Indian or an Afghan empire. And so the Pakistani state, or the deep state, has always feared that overlapping ethnic identities might lead some Pakistanis to feel greater affinity with Indians or Afghans rather than their own co-religionists within Pakistan. And so Pakistan has supported various jihadi groups, whether the Mujahideen in the 70s and 80s or the Taliban since the 1990s, and hoped for a pro-Pakistan, anti-India Afghan government. Unfortunately, that has not happened. Even after August 2021, when the Taliban returned to power, India's relations with Afghanistan have actually remained the same. India remains, a key bilateral development partner and continues to provide aid to the Afghan Taliban, to the Afghans. And recently there was a meeting of the Indian Foreign Secretary with the acting Foreign Minister of Afghanistan in Dubai. If we turn to other South Asian countries, part of Pakistan's challenge is, in order to trade with any of the others, it will need transit trade through India, whether it's Nepal, it's Bangladesh, or via sea with Maldives and Sri Lanka. But with Bangladesh, Pakistan's relations have actually improved in the recent months, primarily because Dhaka's relations with Delhi have worsened. There have been high-level meetings between the civilian and military heads. However, trade with Bangladesh is limited and it will only improve with transit trade through India, which as of now is almost impossible. Pakistan's relations with Bhutan are extremely limited. With those with Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Maldives have always centered around India. Pakistan has historically, Pakistan's relations with these countries have centered around trying to convince the governments in these countries to push back against quote unquote a hegemonic India. And so relations across South Asia or within the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, have rarely improved or rarely allowed trade, commercial, regional connectivity, regional infrastructure to move forward. However, Pakistan does have limited security ties with Sri Lanka, with Maldives, with Bangladesh. Before I conclude, for Pakistan to improve its to provide more to its own citizens, for Pakistan's economy to do better, for Pakistan not to be dependent on the IMF again and again, Pakistan will need to improve relations with India, along with all its other South Asian neighbors. But for that, there would need to be a change in the mindset of the military security establishment and the Pakistani deep state. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was completely taken aback by your statistics there. Less than 5% of Pakistan's trade is with its neighbors.
Yeah.
And that reminds me from the Middle East situation, where I think it's the same figure, is that less than 5% of Israel's trade is with its Arab neighbors. Mm-hmm. Hence, you have continuing conflict. My question to you is I think, is Pakistan's fear of whatever it is, security and that, is that imaginary? Is it leveraged in order to give the military power, or is India really planning to undo partition?
So I'd say it's sort of the first two, the third no. And the best example I will give there is 1971. If India really wanted to undo partition, India would have taken over East Pakistan or current Bangladesh. Why did India withdraw its troops within a period of 3 months? Because India has no interest. And several Indian prime ministers have said that, not just the first prime minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, but in the previous BJP government in 1998-99, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee went to Pakistan and Nawaz Sharif was prime minister, a BJP prime minister said, and that too for the BJP, which actually believes in, was against partition, talks about Akhand Bharat, that prime minister said that partition, is a done deal. We accept Pakistan.
Okay, so if it is, given if it's accepted and India is not trying to undo partition, what are the reasons for government after government after government over the decades using India as let's say, as an excuse not to develop?
So the answer, you gave the answer as your second point, which is that the only way that the military security establishment can actually remain in power and continue to get access to all those resources is if there is an other, if there is an enemy, and an existential enemy, an enemy which craves or which has part of Pakistani territory. that part of Kashmir, or which helped break up Pakistan, which is East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh.
But does everybody see through that?
So I'd say sort of, over the decades, civilian politicians have seen through that. Several Pakistani academics and writers do see through that, but the military still has a stronghold. The military has a very strong. So any civilian prime minister who has tried to, sort of have better relations with India, please see how they have been dealt with, right? I mean,
yes.
Neither the Bhuttos nor Sharifs were ever able to improve relations.
So I was going to leave this question to the last, but I'm going to bring it in now. It's from Prashant Kumar. What will Trump do? How Pakistan is likely to have its relationships with the USA and China? The US has already been betrayed, for want of a better word, over the Osama bin Laden and the whole of the war on terror element there. China must be becoming impatient with the insurgencies and the killing of Chinese citizens. They also must see through this military grasping onto excuses. What happens then?
So I'll talk about China. I have a slightly different take. I accept that China, hasn't obtained all its return on investment on the economic front. But CPEC was never about economics. CPEC was strategic. The way I see CPEC is, for China, Pakistan is its secondary deterrent against India. India has two borders which it has to keep troops and resources on: the border with Pakistan and the border with China. If India-Pakistan relations improve, most of those troops and the resources from the India-Pakistan border can be moved to the India-China border. So Pakistan is to China like North Korea is to China. It keeps South Korea, Japan, US, all, sort of so focused on that threat that their resources go. So while China has concerns on the economic front, on the security front, I do believe that for China, as long as it wants to keep India tied down, it is cheap to keep India tied down by allowing Pakistan to keep provoking India.
In which case, if we have got 4 years of transactional deal making, if there's a deal between India and China, then Pakistan is really let loose without any leverage. One quick question to you, in the way that you describe the military and it hanging on to it. Are we in a situation here slightly different, but where it could suddenly be overthrown, like in Syria, like in these dictatorships in the Arab world?
So, even though I'm not an expert on the Pakistan military, I will say that the Pakistan military is not like, like Syria and many in the Arab world. The Pakistani military has a much stronger and deeper base within society. And even within the Pakistani military, we have never had colonel coups inside which have succeeded in the Pakistani military. There have been a few incidents over the years, but which were dealt with. And so I don't see a colonel coup happening within the Pakistani military. Yes, the Pakistani military is facing challenges, but at the end of the day, the army chief still has control over his military and by and large over the Pakistani polity and society.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So we've gone into the military, the lack of economic development as understanding Pakistan's crises. Next, we have Dr. Tahir Kamran, Professor of History at Beaconhouse National University in Lahore. He has published widely on sectarian militancy and the politics of religious exclusion in Pakistan, and is editor of the Pakistan Journal of Historical Studies. His latest book is Checkered Past, Uncertain Future, The Story of Pakistan. Tahir Kamran, how can we understand Pakistan's crises? The floor is yours.
Well, Pakistan is quite unusual sort of a country. When Salman Rushdie said that Pakistan is inadequately imagined polity, I think many people agreed with it, and Venkat Dhulupala wrote an article on that. or Khalid bin Said saying that Pakistan is an aberration from the norm. That too is not very far commentary on Pakistan. Its very creation cannot be understood as the outcome of a unified nationalist movement fueled by a tangible impulse of nationalism. Rather, it was driven by separatist tendencies of the Muslim Ashraf, and when we say Ashraf, it means elite. From the minority provinces of British India, who sought political power and autonomy rather than broader nationalistic vision for the future of the subcontinent. There's focus on elite interests, particularly of the Muslim minority in the region like Punjab, Bengal, and parts of Northwest. But primarily its leadership emerged from the minority provinces, UP, Madras, Bombay, like the founder of Pakistan was from. He lived mostly in Bombay. In essence, Pakistan's creation was not a result of an anti-colonial struggle, but rather a negotiation between political elites seeking their own positions in the post-colonial order. And that's how we can differentiate Pakistan from rest of South Asian neighbors, as India had its nationalism very, very long. So Pakistan have that. This lack of coherent anti-colonial ideology is evident in the leadership of Pakistan's independent movement. The key figures of Pakistan movement, such as Mohammad Ali Jinnah, did not frame the struggle in terms of a popular anti-colonial narrative. Instead, they emphasized the protection of Muslim political interests in a post-colonial India, seeking autonomy from the Muslim majority regions rather than challenging the colonial system itself. The notion of Pakistan identity, Muslim identity, became central to the formation of Pakistan, not as a result of a mass-based movement, but as a reflection of elite political bargaining. The result was the establishment of Pakistan as a neo-colonial and multinational state. So it's not a post-colonial state, it's a neo-colonial state. And in that neo-colonial setup, the bureaucratic military oligarchy had been a decisive player right from 1947 up to this point. And for first 11 years or so, civilian bureaucracy was the elder brother. But later on, when Ayub Khan became his first dictator from October 1958, that relationship was inverted, and the military became the elder brother, more powerful component of the state operators of Pakistan. And it was because of that, where army was very powerful and army was mostly Punjabi. Therefore, that sense of bereavement was quite tangible in East Pakistan, which became Bangladesh in 1971, which had multiple reasons, linguistic reasons, because Bengali was not accepted as a national language. Similarly, the Bengalis, Bangladeshis or Bengalis were of the opinion that their resources are being utilized for the benefit of the Western Pakistanis, and Western Pakistanis were mostly Punjabis, therefore they were using their resources, and so on and so forth. And then in 1965 war, when Ayub Khan foregrounded this notion that the defense of East Pakistan lies in the West Pakistan, therefore the East Pakistani middle classes got disillusioned, and that's how some sort of a disgruntled feelings started germinating among them. And from 1971 onwards, when Pakistan was seceded, this ideology of Pakistan got a shot in the arm. People had started talking about ideology of Pakistan and two-nation theory. These concepts which got embedded very deep during Ziaul-Haq's time, and Pakistan's identity was reinvented in a religious frame. And from 1979, that year, which I deem very, very important for Pakistan, and for understanding the problems that Pakistan has got itself engulfed. The Islamization of Pakistan by Ziaul-Haq, Khomeini's revolution in Iran, the USSR's intervention into Afghanistan, and Zakat-e-Nushr ordinance, that was a part of Islamization of Ziaul, which led to the sectarian antagonism, where we can see the split between Pakistani populists on the basis of Shia-Sunni animosity, which still exists. And then obviously his Hudud ordinance and blasphemy law, and Ahmadis and Hindus and Christians, all minorities had been the victim of it. So Pakistan is a unique case, so far as its relationship with India is concerned. Obviously, Pakistan's relationship with India had been uneasy, to say the least. The antagonism had been quite tangible throughout, but I must assert here that from last 5 to 6 years, Pakistani establishment, what they call establishment, people say that Pakistan doesn't have any establishment. So one person who is the army chief, he is an establishment. He represents establishment, and whatever he decides is taken seriously by everyone. So Pakistan has revised its stance vis-a-vis Kashmir, because when in 2019 the Kashmir status was reviewed, Pakistan's response was not as acerbic as many people thought it should have been within Pakistan, and General Qamar Javed Bajwa did not respond to all this, the rescinding of the status of Kashmir as a separate state or as a semi-autonomous state. So, and even now, I haven't seen any statement from Pakistan military, or for that matter, the civilian government, which condemn India, despite the fact that Pakistani middle classes have this problem of the rising tide of Hindutva within India, and obviously Muslim minority is facing a lot of problems there. Now, Pakistan, because of this Islamization thing, which was cultivated with the help of America and Saudi Arabia in Pakistan, because this narrative of jihad was brought into Pakistan through University of Nebraska's construction of this narrative, and the peddling of this narrative came from Saudi Arabia to a great extent. Now Pakistan has got into a trouble, and it is not finding any proper way to deal with it, because this Islamization and Islamic fundamentalism has permeated so deep into the body politic of Pakistan, as well as in the social ethos of Pakistan. Having said that, now the new generation that is coming up, that come to university, undergrads and postgrads, they have other views. They want Pakistan to have good relations with its neighbors. But the real problem with Pakistani state is how to keep a balance between India and China. Leadership and a sport that is unequivocal, quite unequivocal, particularly among the youth, and that is Imran Khan. Pakistan's state operators is finding it really difficult to deal with this civilian leader. It's for the first time, probably after Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, that Pakistani army and Pakistani establishment, if you may like to call it, it's finding it really, really difficult. And so far as Shehbaz Sharif is concerned, Shehbaz Sharif is absolutely non-entity in this setup. He has made himself into a joker, and that he has belittled and trivialized the position of a prime minister, because somebody who is non-political by the name of Mr. Mohsin Naqvi, who is home minister or interior minister, he is calling all the shots. So all the power is monopolized by army leadership, and army leadership does not want any more trouble with India. If India relents and India takes one step forward, I'm sure Pakistani state operators, and when I say Pakistani state operators, it means Pakistan Army is ever ready to stick out a reconciliatory hand. But the biggest problem for current setup is how to deal with Imran Khan, and of course it's not realizing the importance of politics of negotiation. It still relies on the politics of military action. The way they're trying to deal things in Pakistan and Balochistan. Balochistan is the trouble is brewing up in Balochistan, and no one has any clue how to deal with it. So I think now the only way Pakistan can sort its problems out is that army should have a realization to take a back seat and allow a political voice to be heard, and politicians to take prominent position in resolving the issues that are engulfing Pakistan. So, but that's not coming through. Army doesn't seem to be in the mood to take a back seat. So that is the problem, which is of prominence, and Pakistani state finds it really difficult to deal with it. I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tahir Kamran, very much for that. Can I just hone down my understanding of what you said there? You're pretty much in agreement with Aparna Pande that the military is in control and it is the bloc. It doesn't have any initiative or imagination of how to deal with India or how to deal with Imran Khan. Is that correct?
That's very yes. I don't agree with her assertion, of course, because Pakistan needs to be reimagined as a polity, because Pakistan has embarked on the path that is a path of exclusion. You're using quite a lot, and this morphology is in currency in India also. Either people have committed treason, or they're kafirs, they have committed some blasphemy, and so on and so forth. Pakistan should be far more inclusive, and it can only be inclusive if political leadership is given its due share. Politicians come after fighting elections, and even then the real power is controlled by the Pakistan army.
And it appears to me, listening to both yourself and Aparna Pande, that there is no mechanism within the civilian society to break into this military control.
The thing is that as Aisha Sadiqa also was talking to you people, because army is so well entrenched. It is the biggest real estate agent in Pakistan. It is the biggest commercial actor in Pakistan. It's the biggest business stakeholder in Pakistan.
When you gave us that very interesting chronology of Pakistan's history, Can you name a date and a particular point where it began to go wrong?
Well, in my own reckoning, Pakistan's history, 1954 is very important when Ayub Khan was the Chief of Army Staff, and he was given over this assignment of Defense Minister. So he was not only a defense minister, but he was army chief. So
okay, so that is the actual point where
but then,
yeah.
Yes, but then army came into prominence, and army became the biggest decision maker when coup d'etat happened, and that was in October 1958. Ever since 1958, army has never played second fiddle to anyone, apart from 3 years when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was prime minister, and army had lost war in 1971.
And before I let you go, you say that it doesn't know how to deal with Imran Khan. What it doesn't know how to deal with is a popularly elected politician that is actually, if he gets in and is able to have a sort of democratic institutions, the military would lose its control. This is what you're saying, is it?
Military will not lose its control. It's, I think, quite personal. It has become quite personal. The current army chief and Imran Khan, because army chief has not been in the habit, or it is not used to, of succumbing to the whims of civilian leadership. They even hanged Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was very, very popular and who was elected politician.
Mm-hmm.
So it is for the first time, and they had been dealing with Nawaz Sharif, they had been dealing with Benazir Bhutto, who were vulnerable to the pressures of Pakistan army. Now this person has a celebrity status, and it has mobilized youth. So army, whatever army wants him to do and come to terms with army, he is not agreeing to it. And that is the real problem. And with Trump coming into power, now Pakistani state is under pressure, because the perception is that Imran Khan has good understanding with Trump, and Trump will do something. And some of Trump's acolytes have started issuing statements in favor of Imran Khan, and that is a real problem for Pakistani state.
I just wanted, a question has just come in your sort of history background here. Ajay Singh says, when Pakistan was created, the Pakistanis looked to connect with their Arab ancestry and leave behind the Indian baggage. How correct is that?
No, I don't agree with that. Pakistan adhered to the South Asian version of Islam, and that is a different Islam, and Pakistanis didn't have any ancestral connections with Arabs. Pakistan had ancestral connections with Indians and Central Asian stock of people to a certain extent,
Although politically, the extreme Islam that we in the West.
So our national language, our dress code, our everything was.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Let's stay with us.
No. Pakistan does not. Pakistan does not adhere to that version of Islam at all.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Stay with us. There are more questions coming in. I hope to get to them all. But our next panelist is Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali from the Global Security Studies at Johns Hopkins and the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. Among his many publications, Development, Poverty, and Power in Pakistan. And he will now enlighten us on how Pakistan has ended up with such this inefficient top-down model of government that we've been hearing about. Syed Muhammad Ali, share with us your thoughts.
Well, thank you very much for the question and for this platform. I will not be an apologist for the malgovernance within Pakistan. However, I do also think that it would be what Shashi Tharoor had called historical amnesia if we were not to cast a wider net. And I think that wider net has to be both temporal and spatial, in the sense that we have to look at history and we have to look at, the broader sort of geostrategic environment in which Pakistan is doing what it's doing. So I'll start, chronologically, and refer. This is not only my doing. I mean, this great collaboration between two historians, Aisha Jalal and Sugatha Bose, and this is back in the 90s, the kind of history that I was exposed to as an undergraduate. And their basic thesis, where they spoke about the Indian subcontinent, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, where authoritarianism is the real deal, right? So the fact that India has never had a coup or it has elections on time, it's an ethno-majoritarian state. With Bangladesh, dynastic rule, fine, the BJP is no longer dynastic. It's got its own set of issues, but Bangladesh, dynastic rule till very recently. And in the case of Pakistan, it was the military, the military working in collaboration with the elites, what Hamza Alvi, another great analyst of South Asia, referred to as the overdeveloped state. And I think this is a direct colonial legacy, because if you look at sort of governance in the colonies, the ideas of Rousseau and all went out the window, because a public servant was not supposed to be representative. A public servant was not supposed to be accountable. He was supposed to lord over the people, right? And he created, and this not only happened in South Asia, it happened in Africa, where to rule over a village, you put the chief in your pocket. And it was this kind of sort of, collusion between the sort of colonial extractive machinery and the local elites, now to sort of, thinking of economic issues, Hamza Alvi also spoke about, how this nascent sort of mercantile class, Hindu mercantile class, the textile looms. It's a fallacy to say that India before the arrival of the British Empire, first the East India Company, the first multinational, as William Dalrymple refers to them. Before that, India was already a nascent, industrial empire, really, and there was an effort made to try and dismantle the looms, to try and create this irrigation economy, right? Many of the ecological problems that one sees in this part of the world, with the sort of extension of the irrigation systems, the creation of, alongside the irrigation network in the Punjab, in parts of Sindh, to training of the Indus, the mighty Indus, and creating irrigation systems, it did allow for a lot of cash cropping. Growing crops like sugarcane, growing crops like cotton to feed the mills in Manchester, without which we might not have seen the Industrial Revolution take off, without the colonies. So, that interconnection, and then what that did to the local political economy. Imran Ali, the historian, economic historian Imran Ali, has also done very interesting work on this, how it kind of, it created this staticness within the peasantry, in the Punjab. Other scholars have looked at sort of, the British census, with the need for, this administrative understanding of this vast piece of land, and how that created, it exacerbated some of the sectarian and communal frictions that pre-existed, but they were certainly exacerbated by the need of this, of the census, when the British census happened in the middle of the 19th century. And what happened with the canal economies is things like the Ghodapal scheme, which were, and dedicated land to the military, right? Where the military started getting land for the cavalry, for breeding the horses for the cavalry, for large livestock farms to provide, dairy, to cater to the needs of the British Raj and its military, comprised of locals, of course, and that ratio changed after the mutiny. I mean, because initially with the East India Company, that there was a lot more, much less British physical boots on the ground. And, and then that created an incentive for the locals, especially when they would be rewarded, to have greater to bring more locals into the military. And they would receive honorary titles and land grants. And this carried all the way up to the, First and Second World Wars. I mean, that's why people were upset that where's the brown guy in movies like Dunkirk, right? I mean, because they were fighting the Gurkhas from Nepal and, from Bengal and, from the Punjab and the Pathans. I mean, those regiments, where all did they go? I mean, all the way to North Africa, and Southeast Asia. So, that happened, and they were incentivized by large land grants. So really, Aisha Siddiqa's work picks up on this much later, right? And one can't sort of truncate, cause and effect, because I mean, this phenomena had started, century and a half ago, but then it continued after partition. Like in the Punjab, for instance, the land was supposed to belong to the government of Punjab, and the military was leasing land. And then, the military, there was also a compulsion. It didn't just like become all powerful by itself. There was the fear of a larger hegemonic neighbor. And the Kashmir issue has been a festering issue. I mean, it's not to say that Pakistan handled its own situation well. I mean, it had its internal hegemonies and still has them now. But there was this kind of existential threat. I mean, right after 1948, when both countries had different views on Kashmir, the annexation of Kashmir, and the tribals went in, and Pakistan got a sizable chunk of it. And since then, there's been this lingering sort of restiveness between these two countries, and that really helped the military assert itself. So it's already had an economic interest, and it started encroaching on that political space as well. And I think the previous speaker, Dr. Kamran, referred to some of this. So then one can start thinking about sort of the Zia years and all, but I'll go there, but just in a second, because prior to that, when America started becoming more and more important, we started seeing, the initially Keynesian style economics, so a lot of money going for geostrategic reasons, Pakistan being very quick to join the CETO and CENTO pacts, those initial Cold War alliances, and being rewarded for it. So one started seeing between the military governments, particularly Ayub Khan, you had Harvard-trained economists who came in who were still thinking trickle down, right? Like give relief to big business. I mean, we see still some of that happening. I mean, neoliberalism, post-Keynesian style economics, neoliberal economics, the influence of the Chicago school put all of this on steroids. And these are debates that we still see, I mean, even in the US. But, you started seeing this, Pakistan becoming a valuable geostrategic asset. And it was disappointed when, the US did not kind of side with Pakistan, if you will, in the 65 war, which was still, the bone of contention was still that traditional rivalry. In 71, it was the creation of Bangladesh because of how the rest of Pakistan had behaved towards a country separated. I mean, look at that genius of the partition that happened in a few months, where you had a country separated by 1,000 miles, right? So these are all, the historical roots to these issues. But then again, when you had sort of, the Green Revolution coming, to Pakistan. The Green Revolution comes in, and again, top-down, chemical and mechanical agriculture creates massive amounts of de-peasantization, and a lot of ecological issues, which a lot of people talk about. around not only in South Asia, but in a lot of the global South. So, alongside these things, then we have, the Afghan situation in the 80s with the Soviets. Then you have the Musharraf years, post 9/11, that Frankenstein, that, the proto-Taliban turning into the Taliban, and then the Al-Qaeda coming and sitting here. And then Musharraf gets a lease on life, because, democracy had been shattered when, Musharraf came in, but he got then a 10-year shelf life. And even more recently, I would argue that with Imran Khan, there's some expression because of the diasporic pressure, this sympathy for democracy in Pakistan. But let's remember Imran Khan's attitude, when he'd gone to Russia and sort of, what he said about the US involvement in the toppling of his government. And there was a sigh of relief within the US, hearing some people speak, sort of analysts commenting on this, that there was, that the military establishment has realized that they don't want to put all their eggs in the Chinese basket, and they want to see, that they are seeing a decoupling between the military establishment, which had earlier patronized him, provided him patronage, to them parting kind of ways with his sort of ad hoc way and his sort of assertion on the Pakistani state. So there are these. If we just look at the trees, we're going to miss the forest, because these interconnections still exist in our world.
Thank you very much. That is a very comprehensive look at the causes, I think, of why Pakistan is as it is. Can I just ask you the same question? Is there a point in those things in that it could have been brought back from the brink? So one time we had 1954 earlier. Is there a point in your mind that this could have been stopped?
It was the 50s. I think the Zia years were the most damning. And it was the Saudis, the CIA, the ABC of Jihad, this pedagogical material that had been created. University of Nebraska involved in that process. And this is not me. There's like the New York Times wrote about this.
Yes.
So I think the 1980s, because of what it did internally and what it did with the Afghan situation, and it was a precursor to what happened 9/11 onwards, and it's still a very perturbing situation.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's helped us drill down a bit on understanding these things. There's a couple of questions that I'm going to put to the panel at the end of this, which is about the education system and about climate change, whether that's got any impact at all on what is happening. But our final panelist is Professor Yunas Samad, South Asian Studies Associate Fellow of Political Science at Lahore University of Management Sciences, as well as being Emeritus Professor at the University of Bradford. Among his publications, The Pakistan-US Conundrum, Jihadists, the Military, and the People, the Struggle for Control, exactly what we've been talking about. What is really underpinning this Pakistan crisis? Yunas Samad, give us your argument and help us conclude.
Thank you very much. Let me first thank Lord Bruce and the Democracy Forum for inviting me to speak, and to Humphrey Hawksley for chairing this session and provoking us with difficult questions. I want to talk about the intersection of politics and the economy. Rather than seeing them as distinct spheres, I want to see the interrelationship between the two. I've been told I don't have that much time, so I'm going to be brief, and I'll make some points and probably partial, and I'm hoping that this might provoke some questioning. I think the way I look at the situation is that this is a crisis of regime type, which is manifesting in the political and the economic spheres. And when I say that I'm talking about regime type, I'm talking about the crisis of this hybrid regime model. Elections don't make a democracy. Elections are not enough. Just the fact that you have what I have written about in Pakistan's case is that it's an illiberal, tutelary hybrid regime. It's a mixture of authoritarianism and democracy. And what I'm trying to suggest is that what we see this period from the demise of Musharraf when he was removed from office to the fall of Imran Khan is that the military has been an extremely powerful player, which originally was operating more from behind the scenes in Zardari's time, and which now almost is giving diktats to the government on policy issues across the board. I mean, inherently, this autonomy or basis of power is the fact that the Defense Ministry and the intelligence agencies are populated by serving military officers who always look to the commander-in-chief rather than the prime minister. Now, this is about where real power lies, and that the government of the time, and certainly at the present, are not calling the shots. Whatever decision on critical issues are being made, the army has a say in the matter. The army originally would say that it has interests and it has its particular red lines, and they are Kashmir, India, Afghanistan, United States, China, strategic issues. It gives them what you call dominance, monopoly over the security agenda. And then it has used the crisis in Balochistan and the tribal areas to extend the security agenda to undermine the authority of the federal government. So it's using this crisis as well to increase its leverage. Okay, and you know, and already speakers have talked about how important the military is, etc. But what is the connection with the economic crisis? And I think that we can show a link between that. So, for instance, I mean, already colleagues have and speakers have talked about the importance of direct trade with India. There is indirect trade. But this has been blocked by the army. The army does not feel that it is in its interest to see an improvement of relations with India, and that even when evidence from the World Bank suggests that it would result in an 80% increase in exports. So, I mean, they are, in spite of themselves, cutting their nose. If we look at the military budget, I mean, we have been going through a crisis for the last 5 years or more, and the military budget has, on the average, increased by 13% per annum. So there may be an economic crisis in the country, but there is no economic crisis for the military. And of course, the thing about the budget is that under Musharraf, he took out military pensions and put it into the civilian budget so that the military budget looks like that it has decreased. So, I mean, here you can see deep interest of the military in maintaining a certain position of control. But the army also runs the largest industrial business combine in the country, is the country's largest landlord, and it has preferential tax treatment, access to land and capital and infrastructure is also given considerable preference. And so we have now a considerable leverage in the economy as well. And they are not actually either economically very successful, because in some cases the profit they are very what you call struggling kind of enterprises, and on the other hand they're not paying, they're getting lots of subsidies and backhanders from the state, and they're not and there have been the major resistance for capital gains tax on urban property, because they are one of the largest developers of urban land, such as the DHA scheme. So what I'm trying to show is that military intervention, even though it starts from the politics, has a direct impact on the economic arena. Let's flip over and look at political power and governance. I mean, the army can't work, it doesn't use coercion all the time. It uses the colonial template of coming into power and then getting collaborators, political collaborators, to work with them. And what happens is that to make political collaborators work with you, you need to actually then satisfy their needs and their demands. Political parties, most of them are vote banks, collection of rival patronage networks. Even though Imran is trying to break this mold, he's also a victim of this same print. But there is an economic cost. This is not just simply about, having pliable politicians. These pliable politicians need to actually feed back into their what you call patronage networks with resources. And so what you see is that the largest contingents of politicians who are landlords and agriculturalists are also the ones who have the lowest effective tax in the country and have subsidized imports and favorable pricing formula. So what we begin to see is for the price of collaboration, just don't tax us, let us just do what we want. We know that the government has been streamlining, has been downsizing ministries, getting rid of quite important ministries to do with poverty alleviation and other areas. But National Assembly members, Provincial Assembly members are allocated development funds so they can channel it into their patronage networks. I can, there are lots more examples of this kind of thing that you can say, but I wanted to point out is that, look, what we begin to see is that development projects also become politicized. We can pick projects from the CPEC. So Saiwal power plant, what was the logic of having an imported coal plant right in the heart of Punjab? And the logic simply was, we need to build a power plant quick enough to provide energy for prior to the 2018 elections to deal with the blackout in Lahore and central Punjab. So coal, power plant, imported coal plants usually are based by the port, and here we have coal being trucked all the way from Karachi to Saiwal, just outside of Lahore, to feed this plant. And of course, what we see is that the political decision-making undermines the economic efficacy of this project. We talk about the motorway. The motorway, I think the Multan-Sakkar section was responsible for the creation of nearly 30,000 jobs in political constituencies for the major political parties, and that's why but people from the Planning Commission says, what is the logic of building a motorway section in the middle of Pakistan, not at the end of, not at the beginning from Karachi, or from the other end, from the north, from Gujarat? And the point is, it's about politics. So what I'm trying to argue is this: is that we have a regime type which you call actually creates enormous strains on the economy. Now, the thing is that I'm going to wrap this up now, is that, this kind of is an example of military-civil elite capture. They basically have shared up the economy among themselves so they can share power, and this allows the military to remain top dog in this process. This actually has worked in the past in the context of the Cold War, in the context of the War on Terror, because an external patron like the United States came along and brought in huge amount of funds, allowed these IMF loans to be rolled over, and I think even to up to 2018, there was about $200 million was coming from the US to support Pakistan military activity. So what we see now is that this particular model has actually been exhausted. Now, the military do have an institutional memory, because Pakistan has been precisely in this situation when Zia took over. It was isolated and broke. It was in the same situation Musharraf took over. It was isolated and broke. In both cases, United States came in to step in. I don't think at this time an external power is really that interested in coming in and saving. So I think it really raises a major connection, is that it's about removing these privileges. I've only mentioned a few, but there isn't a sector in Pakistan's society which isn't getting privileges, tax breaks, and benefits from the center in order to keep them quiescent. There is an elite capture shared between the military and the civil elites. And of course, the military is the major agent in this. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. That is absolutely fascinating. The military budget increase of 13%, this massive landlord. And you seem to have painted there a picture of a high-level corrupt elite society controlled by the gun, which does not drip down, and thus you have the endearing poverty there. And as you were talking, I did write down how much is this like Egypt, Libya, Sudan, Syria, unlike Southeast Asia that we heard of from a previous panelist, where they do work more closely together and where the wealth is shared better. We have some questions coming in. What I would like to do is bring them to you and then come back round to the panel again. 3 of them are to do with domestic and 1 of them is to do more international. So we'll lump the domestic ones together. Anand Singh Tomar, should Pakistan follow India's lead with Make It in Pakistan initiative to help the economy? Ritesh Nigam, are failings in the education system key to some of Pakistan's biggest problems? And Nadeem Shah, surely climate issues are also playing a part in Pakistan's difficulties, as evidenced by recent floods. Yunas Samad, give us disparate topics. Give us your thoughts on that.
I think one of the things which I've been struggling with in the recent crisis is why is the Pakistan rupee so overvalued? Because when you talk about developing countries, the usual strategy is to undervalue your currency to improve your export. And so when people say, the question was make in India, make in Pakistan, but really the interesting question is that we don't seem to have an economy which is geared to production, to produce things, let alone export things. We seem to have made an import economy for some reason. And I'm not quite clear why we actually went down this road. Education, I think, is critical. We don't spend enough on primary education. We don't spend enough on higher education. I think primary education is the most important thing. We don't spend it. And one of the major reasons why we divert all our resources into security.
Right.
We are diverting all these resources into these budgets for security at the expense of education, at the expense of health.
Climate natural disasters, yes. Is that an issue?
I would say climate change is going to become a growing issue. And the thing is that Pakistan is not even prepared for it. Pakistan just sees them as as how would you say, as a reason to try to elicit more external support. They don't see it as, look, this is a real crisis that we need to actually. So in the sense, we have a lot of problems, and climate change is going to become a variable which is going to hit us at moments when we are most vulnerable and unprepared.
Thank you. I want to go to Aparna Pande now on that made in Pakistan thing. Would anybody want to invest in Pakistan?
So, first, I'll tie into what Professor Samad said. I mean, Pakistan's challenges, the economic, are domestic. The economy has to produce, the economy has to grow, it has to export. If Pakistan economy was doing better, then to some extent CPEC, some part of CPEC would have benefited Pakistan, but it hasn't, and the reason has to do domestic. So if Pakistan's economy grows and it shows that they're actually manufacturing, then yes, countries companies would like to invest in Pakistan. It's 240 million people. It's people who are the average age is 25, 26 years old. But I mean, and a large, labor pool, people who speak English. But there are other challenges which prevent companies and then political challenges which prevent India's neighbors.
And it sounds to me from what we've had, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that this military controlled society is one of the dumbest around in the model world.
But
except they think themselves to be the most intelligent.
Yes,
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Am I right there, Aparna?
Yeah, absolutely. And as long as they manage to stay in power, as long as they have the levers, which, as Professor Samad laid out, all the foundations, the property, taxes. I mean, it is a state which is it's a country which is basically ruled by the military, primarily the army. And so as long as they keep that control, it will be almost impossible to get out of this vicious cycle.
So this is the core of the crisis. Tahir, Kamran, as we're honing in on this, would anybody want to invest in Pakistan, and how do we get out of this conundrum?
Well, first of all, the civilian setup should have greater say in the policy making,
but every time they have a greater say, they get arrested or locked up or overthrown.
Yes, but now with the newer generation coming up, I think things will be different. So one has to be optimistic. There's no other option. The youth that is in interaction with me while I'm teaching, I am getting different vibes from the young people.
And when would the youth? I mean, we've seen changes in societies. Goodness, either violent or gradual. When would the youth feel confident, strong enough to actually challenge those generals and tell them that they are the dumbest?
I think that theoretically they're already challenging generals because generals now are not mustering up courage to go to visit educational institutions. They have gone to Lahore University of Management Sciences. They have come to my university and here and there, and they were not entertained by. They were asked very, very difficult questions, and they were challenged.
And where are they educated?
Well, they have their own Pakistan Military Academy in Ahmedabad near Islamabad. It's not very far from Islamabad. From there, they're educated, and they don't believe in education that way, because education is something really contrary to generals or to the military officer. So the person who is studious enough, should not opt for military. They believe in action. They don't believe in thought process. Okay, history, Pakistan's history is an ample proof of it. So that is the problem. And another thing that Yunas had given quite quite comprehensive overview of how Pakistan is functioning as a polity as well as economy. The thing is that from Afghanistan problem onwards, Pakistan's economy has become a besieged economy, which does not geared to produce anything. Instead, it's more of a aid economy that is run on aid. So Pakistan Army as well as Pakistani civilian governments, they have started relying on aid. World Bank and IMF and America.
So it's a basket case economy. I just want to move on to Syed Mohammad Ali now on these two questions. We're hearing that the generals don't want education. And nobody wants to invest seriously in Pakistan to create factories and that sort of thing. So how do we get out of this mess?
It is going to be a challenge, and again, the onus is going to be on Pakistan. But I agree with Dr. Kamran that Pakistan has had an aid economy, and it's an aid economy that aid is not altruistic with real politics. I mean, there's the politics of aid, and it's not only the geostrategic aid that poured in the 80s and 2000 post 9/11 onwards. It's the aid that always comes with the string attached of pulling Pakistan in, because it's still stuck. I mean, it hasn't become, manufacturing hasn't taken off, not even as a race to the bottom of the barrel where women are stitching garments for fast fashion. But it's still, I mean, cotton is the largest export for the country. So it's still, stuck in that sort of, appropriation of export model, and those who benefit from it locally. And that's going to be a real challenge, because I mean, the global political economy is not going to take it easy on Pakistan. And it is stuck in a situation. I mean, even if it's a military with a country, it has to invest in the people, because then ultimately, when there's lackluster growth, the lack of human development, everyone takes a hit, even the security apparatus. So there is this, this growing disgruntlement, but it seems like the transactional nature of the world. Look at climate. I mean, we're on a suicide path still, and we're going to see still more rollback. And the solutions to climate finance. I mean, okay, now take more loans to, use market-led strategies, which are easily captured, elite captured in asymmetrical markets because of these intrinsic power relations, that we continue seeing the same repackaging. I mean, we see oil-rich countries hosting the COPs. So it seems that Pakistan is also stuck in a situation where the elite can't have its cake and eat it too. Something's got to give.
Something's got to give. I just want to very quickly go around now, based on a final question from Peter Cornish. How might international dimensions have contributed to the situation in Pakistan today? We've covered some of that, but take that in mind and give me your one word or two words of what the real crisis in Pakistan is. Let's just go away with something we can remember. Let's start where we finished off there. We'll go to Yunas Samad.
Well, I mean, I think Pakistan's problem seems to be is that the international community isn't really interested in Pakistan. It's got enough problems of its own. It's more concerned about more immediate issues, and really Pakistan is on the back burner. I honestly think that probably is the best thing for Pakistan.
I was going to say that's an opportunity then. Can I just move on that? Give us your one or two words on the real crisis, military, economy. Can you just sum it up before I let you go?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately Pakistan needs to have civilian control over the entire state. I think that what is interesting about Imran Khan's challenge is that this debate about the dominance of the military is now being discussed in the Punjab. Previously, it used to be discussed as Punjab versus other ethnic groups. Now people are considering that this is now a problem with the military institution, and this discussion it's an early discussion. I don't think
discussion just beginning. Thank you very much. Aparna, Pande, give us your final thought.
All Pakistan's sort of external or internal problems are internal at the end. Sort of Pakistan's domestic politics, its society, its economy, and the whole of the military, sort of, once that issue is resolved, it is tied to all of Pakistan's foreign policy, its relations with China, with India, with South Asia, or any other country. So it needs to look inward and resolve those issues before it looks outward.
Has to sort it out itself. Tahir, Kamran?
Well, the pluralization of its state structure and civilianization of ISI, these are the two things that are very, very important. For that, Pakistan will have to be reimagined by its intelligentsia.
Reimagined and civilianization of the ISI is important because that's the main intelligence security service. Syed, Mohammad Ali, final thoughts?
I think great power competition is another issue to think about. I mean, right now it's all about conflict and competition. I mean, Pakistan, I know Nixonian days of detente are over, the geostrategic realities are different, but why can there not be great power collaboration? Climate, I mean, if you think of the Indus coming out of the Tibetan, glaciers, and India and Pakistan, and even the Brahmaputra and Bangladesh, I think this is stuff, that's the 3 C's that the Biden administration talked about, but didn't do much on. One of them was cooperation, and it was meant to be on climate. And I don't see that happening, anytime in the future.
Okay, the lack of cooperation. We are out of time. Thank you, our audience, for your questions and comments, and thank you for our great panel. Aparna, Pande, Tahir, Kamran, Syed, Mohammad, Ali, Yunas, Samad, for helping us understand better the Pakistan crisis. My appreciation too to Lord Charles Bruce and the Democracy Forum's hardworking team that puts together these monthly debates. Please check out our sister magazine, Asian Affairs, which, like this forum, examines issues in a way not often addressed in the mainstream media. I have learned an awful lot today. Our next Democracy Forum debate is at the same time on Monday, February the 17th. Territorial claims in the South China Sea, a question of legality, or I'll be asking a key issue in the new era of Donald Trump. Until then, from me, Humphrey Hawksley, and all at the Democracy Forum, stay safe and goodbye.